Things go with online. Safety.
It was, no one showed up there. Number one, no one showed up. We just talked about the issues. We said we had some patrol car over there, some traffic. Not an issue.
Okay.
No.
All right, today is 4:30, at 2:00. This is the April Environmental Advisory Committee meeting. We'll go through the roll call and the pledge before we call it order. Or actually, you know what, I'll call it order, and then we'll go through the roll call and pledge. So I'll motion to call this meeting to order at 2:03. Can I get a second?
I'll second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, and then before we go through the roll call, let's do the pledge. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, who we got? Supervisor Nowak is absent. Tony Filipski is absent. Vern Thompson is absent. Planning Board Chair is absent. I don't believe we have the Zoning Board of Appeals Chair in the room. They are absent. Ruth Kasachi, who is the designee for the Planning Board, is absent. Sandy Prismablack, you are present. Is that correct?
Yep.
All right. Brian Bibziak.
Present.
All right, I got it right. Pat Bowen, Town Engineer.
Present.
Andrew Lloyd, Assistant Town Engineer.
Here.
Rick Colburn, Supervising Code Enforcement Officer.
Present.
Mark Bielefeld is absent. Joe Enos is absent. And Dan Young, Town Planner, I am here. Okay. Next item up is minutes approval for the March meeting. I will motion to approve those minutes. Can I get a second?
I'll second. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, and the first item up and the only item on today's agenda is under old business. And it's 2733 William. Proposal of a 124-foot wireless telecommunications tower facility by Verizon on leased property. Since the last meeting, we have had some minor progress, still progress. The planning board called the public hearing on this item. Under our local law, we do require a balloon test, which has been filed for and is being appropriately advertised by the applicant. That will be held on May 10th from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. And the alternate date is May 12th from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. We have received comments, one of which came in today, which was from the Erie County Department of Environmental Planning. There's no recommendation. Stephen, that'll be getting sent over to you hopefully before end of the day. We also received from the New York State Thruway Authority, which I believe was circulated to yourself, Stephen, and the rest of the project team. The Thruway Authority talked about tower roadway offset. They needed a plan view showing the offset from the base of the proposed monopole to the edge of New York State Thruway Authority pavement, as well as the 62-foot failure radius from the hinge point. The tower foundation, they are requesting the complete design plans for the monopole foundation, which is not limited to, including but not limited to anchor bolt size and embedment, footing details, and reinforcement, and pile depth. They also called out that there should be a labeling change on sheets AD1, SB1, and C1. Right now, it looks like it's demonstrating westbound, and they're looking for eastbound, or ultimately it's just not labeled on the sheets. So maybe they're just asking for that. And then with the elevations on C3, they're looking for a demonstration of the hinge point and associated dimensions in the elevation view of the tower. Stephen, I believe you saw those comments from the New York State Thruway Authority. I will turn the floor over to you at this time to discuss. And additionally, the planning board did ask for considerations by National Grid. The Department of Building and Plumbing has been in contact with them, but we have not had full response regarding if there's any concerns with the location in relation to their lines adjacent to the property.
Okay, you're still waiting there, Dan, for a response from.
Yeah, I've spoken with them, but I haven't received a response as to whether or not that's a concern with the location, including the balloon test portion of this.
Understood. Okay. Yep, and we did get the throughway comments that you read there and are working on getting the plans updated to reflect those. So as soon as we have those ready to go, we'll get a supplement in showing those requested changes. But yeah, I believe this is the first time before the board with the new location. I could be wrong. I believe last time we were still pending. We met with the planning board, discussed moving it, the tower and compound further from the residences there. So now we're showing setbacks, which was 121 feet, is now 272 feet to the nearest dwelling. To the actual Interstate 90 itself is 124 feet. And then to the nearest power line is showing 117 feet. There were some discussions whether that one is actually active, and whether it seemed to be that the lines were cut down on either end of it, and that there's the new steel power lines going through that sort of took the place of those, which are much further away. I think those are closer to maybe 150 or 60 or 70, but we can get that confirmed. But in any event, that's all going to be sorted, as Dan noted. He reached out to the grid carriers there, and they can confirm. But so that's sort of the updates on our end. We resubmitted the EAF with minor changes just to account for the update here for the new location. So if there's any questions on that, happy to discuss.
Stephen, correct me if I'm wrong, but you haven't filed for any of the variances related to the setback or the fence height, because I believe the fence height was demonstrated at 7 feet. We require a max 6 feet.
So I think we were going to treat that as a waiver request, if I remember correctly. Dan, do you need I think your code allows for waiver relief as opposed to a variance.
I believe you are correct for part of that. I'm not sure if the fence is included in that. I'll double check. I know our drive-throughs have a similar scenario where that request can be heard by the town board based on the way that section of design standards work.
Okay. If not, I think we could probably, I'll check with the planning team, but I think that, they could probably
I
get
think you
a
were right
6.
on that.
It's just a foot difference, right?
It's more than a foot. It goes, so the setback goes by the height
Sorry,
of the pole.
The fence, right? I think the fence.
Yes, fence height is a foot difference.
Yeah. Yeah, the setbacks I think are covered under the waiver request from our initial application. Because essentially anywhere you're gonna put it on this parcel, just how given the shape of the of this parcel, you're gonna need some setback relief unless you're sticking it right in the middle of those storage containers. But I think, importantly, and I haven't really raised, but we have in our application is the sort of the public utility standard, which essentially exists for, these types of issues, because in order for the technology to work, it really has to be located in, very small areas, which sort of has to square with zoning requirements, but it's been sort of litigated to the point where the standards really become, these telecom facilities are essentially public utilities because of their unique nature of having to be located somewhere. So it's typically a lesser standard for approval there. And once the need is shown, with respect to the board, the local authority is sort of a little bit diminished there in terms of your typical variance type standards. So just wanted to raise that.
Any thoughts from the room?
This is special use, correct?
Yeah.
So they could waive it. I mean, that's their prerogative, but they didn't have to go through the variances, setbacks, and that's the,
For 255,
Private
it's not
board.
it's not for all special use permits, but it's like for the way 255 reads, yeah.
yeah.
Because the requirement isn't coming out of 260.
Right. Which is their relief, the zoning board.
Right, the zoning board would give relief to 260 or what it doesn't define otherwise.
Right.
In this case, it defines otherwise. I guess from an environmental standpoint, is there the strongest concern I would have is height visual impacts.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Also, you already reached out to National Grid to get their feedback on
Right,
its
they have,
proximity to their lines.
right, so they've
Set
seen the
up-
applications, they haven't given. They haven't raised a response back. Indicating either way if they have a concern or they don't have a concern, so. I mean, do we want to, I hate to say it, but do we want to table it until they give a response back, or do we?
Have they exceeded the time frame?
I would say they.
I think that-
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think we should table it then, but that's just me. I mean, I understand that.
to me, if the board tables it, isn't that a mutual consideration between the party and the town extending the review timeline?
I don't think it would be a question of extending the timelines, it's their schedule to get the construction working based on waiting indefinitely for the review. I mean, a 30-day referral is 30 days and
Did the clock restart when you changed locations?
Well, so this was brought up based on the planning board. So originally the Thruway Authority was identified. National Grid wasn't identified as part of the original referral.
got it. And when did that go out?
Because they're not, from my understanding, they're just a neighboring entity. They're not it's not like a jurisdiction like DC or DOT.
Right. There would be a courteous, typical request for adjacent parcels, pending on impacts. I imagine that not normally there would be the referral, but in this case, it would be recommended that they do get referred to this project. And when do they actually go out to them?
To National Grid, contact started within the last 30 days.
Yeah, so knowing that and giving them at least a little time, because you know how long it could take to get a response back, to look into it, investigate. I would hate to see if we give the approvals and then they came back and they have some sort of a concern or some other, contestant on this. And they are adjacent directly right to that. And again, I don't know what their standards are,
Yeah,
and we're not reviewing to anything like that.
Well, Dan, you had mentioned the planning board recommended a public hearing.
Right, they did give recommendation on the special use permit. Just a public hearing, just a call to public hearing.
So
There'll be a resolution in the next meeting, which will be on the 13th, to schedule a public hearing for the second meeting of May. Is that accurate?
Not fully accurate, because the balloon test still has to take place. So there's a requirement for a balloon test to gather data on show the public how high
Visual.
the tower would be.
It's part of the public.
And you said it's May 5th, Dan? Okay.
It's required to be held prior to the public hearing. I don't know if it's
May
necessarily
10th.
hard.
May 10th, right?
Yeah, May 10th with the alternate date of the 12th, so a resolution hasn't been filed at this time for the call to public hearing, given that, you know, balloon test still has to go through. I guess in theory, we still have time to file that, I believe.
What I'm hearing is
Possibly
that
not.
we wouldn't hold anything up if we did a neg deck, or excuse me, if we tabled.
Table it, right,
Yeah.
there's still timelines, still have to
So
be.
in that case, then I don't see a problem with it.
Okay. Does everyone else in the room feel?
I agree.
I would
Yeah.
concur. So I'll motion to table it.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So just a quick confirmation on my end. So is the tabling just to wait for National Grid comments to confirm no issues there? Is that the primary concern?
I would like to definitely get their comments along with wait any comments the public hearing might arise if everybody gets noticed, and then the balloon test, so all three of those will be completed prior to our determination.
Okay. So the only issue that I think is sort of circular, Dan, I know you've been at the planning board meetings, is it seems like their hesitation is they say, oh, well, we don't have environmental's recommendation, so we can't recommend a public hearing. And then we come in here and we're sort of waiting also for a public hearing.
Well, they gave recommendation for the call to public hearing. They didn't give recommendation on the special use permit. So you would be back before them, following the balloon test and the call to public hearing in, would that be June? And in June, we would have already held the May EAC meeting.
Okay. So, okay. Are there any concerns from the gentleman who seems to be, I thought it was a fair question. He seemed a little bit confused by my question.
No, I agree
We're going
with
in
you.
circles is what I'm saying, right? So
Yeah,
no one takes an
I-
action and then they blame the other boards, right? So that's sort of my question.
No, exactly what you just incurred, that thinking the planning board wouldn't make any move until we heard from us, and then
Yeah.
we're not making a move. So, yeah, so I agree with you that
Okay.
they would normally wait for our recommendation, but being the fact that they're gonna call the public hearing, they agree with that. We'll wait for the public hearing, the balloon test, and we'll have another meeting prior to going back before that.
Okay.
So we should wrap everything up, and then they would just make a recommendation, and then it would probably be on the next adjacent board meeting.
Okay.
That
That makes sense.
in June, right? Okay.
Okay. Yeah, I was trying to at least, hopefully avoid the sort of kicking around that seemed like was happening with planning and waiting for you guys, but I understand there's still outstanding comments, so I appreciate that. So
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen.
all right, thanks.
Okay, and with that, we have no new business at this time. I will motion to call the meeting to adjourn at 2:21.
I'll second. All in favor?
Aye. So, as a board,
Hold on, Rick.
man, you called it.
Because I called it doesn't mean I shut down the meeting.
He hasn't stopped recording yet.
He just can't hold himself back.